So yeah, if you want to just give like a quick intro as to who you are and a little bit about what you do briefly.
Sure. So my name is Emma Miller. I am a singer-songwriter from Scotland. I'm based in Edinburgh. And like a lot of independent musicians, I also have a part-time job, which I am very happy to be open about because I feel like my Web3 life might mean that music will become a full-time job, which would be incredible. Um, and my part-time job is something I've just come from today, which is being a tour guide on the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, showing the tourists around different parts of the city. And I have to say, entering the Web3 space, I've noticed how many links there are between like talking with groups of people all day, jumping on spaces in the evening. I feel like I'm getting very well versed in talking to people from all over the world all day, every day is kind of what I'm doing at the minute, which is a great skill to have heading into Web3 because so much of it is about that, kind of connecting with people from everywhere. Um, and one other thing that I do is I am halfway through a part-time course on counseling, on CBT counseling. That was something I began when I was fairly sure I was going to close the book on music. And as the world goes, the universe has other plans for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of halfway through this course. I nearly didn't come back to it. It started again this month in September, but I'm glad I did because I feel like it's giving me another side to myself, another skill. Um, and yeah, I want to try and get that qualification as a kind of accomplishment next year. But who knows? Music is certainly taking precedent for me at the moment. So I'll see how long I can juggle all of these balls in the air for.
That's awesome. So I feel that that's really cool to hear too, because I also have a part-time job and I feel like when you have, another form of income, it takes the pressure off you as a musician to like, because some people are actually out here doing this full time, and when you have to provide for yourself and you have to provide for your family, like the pressure can get stacked on you, I feel like. So when you have
Yeah.
something else that's fueling you, like from a money standpoint, it's definitely like gives you the opportunity to create, in my opinion, and with less pressure, which, as you know, when you have less pressure and you're creating, that's when you can probably most likely create your best stuff.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more with that statement. And it's something I felt very much myself of I was in London for about 5 years trying to make music happen, classic part-time job and hoping to subsidize everything enough that music would get up and running. And as soon as I shifted that mindset of not having music pay my bills, it was totally transformative for me. I firstly moved back to Scotland because I was done with London and just thought, you know what, I don't want to pursue music as this thing that has to pay my rent, that has to be my business. So I'm going to do this last EP and share this body of work. And I'm sure I'll continue to make music forever, but I don't want to do it in this sense. And as soon as I had that mindset shift that you've just talked about, it was unbelievable. Like things started happening with my music. Not that that was what I was aiming for, but it naturally, just the joy that I suddenly found again, it was like a weight off of my shoulders. Fell back in love with music once more. And yeah, I mean, I have returned to the business side now, but I totally think that, I mean, musicians, we're doing it for the love of it. This is not something you tell people to go into for the money. So I think that is a good point to just remind people that it is okay to be doing what you have to do in order to have this like luxurious, amazing channel for our kind of creativity.
Yes, and I am just curious to know, what is the music scene like in Edinburgh? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Close enough, Matthew. I say Edinburgh.
Edinburgh? Okay.
I hear a lot of kind of Americans say Edinburgh,
Edinburgh.
um, Edinburgh, where that's not wrong. Like That's fine. Everyone knows what you're talking about. I think locally we would say Edinburgh. Edinburgh. I don't know why.
Edinburgh. Okay.
Edinburgh, yeah. Um, the local scene. Do you know what? I moved here in September and I have yet to delve into the local scene. I think
Hmm.
you being on Web3 Twitter culture, it is kind of all consuming. Um, it certainly means IRL is maybe taking a back seat for me just now, other than creating music. Um, when I arrived here in September, it was to do this counseling course. So that was my focus. I've been to see some fantastic gigs here. And doing that actually has connected me with a couple of musicians. But personally, I have yet to discover the Edinburgh music scene. Reputation wise, it is actually Glasgow, which is on the other side, which is the West Coast. Edinburgh's East Coast. Glasgow is meant to have an incredible music scene, um, with tons of kind of indie bands that all find their way to Glasgow, which has many music venues. Um, but it is on the bucket list is to get out into Edinburgh. I'm going to see my friend perform actually on Tuesday,
Oh,
who's
nice.
plays the accordion and does more kind of traditional folk music.
Uh-huh.
So I'll report back. Um,
Sweet. Yeah.
but yeah.
I'm like totally in that mindset too, where I live in a city where there is a lot of music, but I'm also super like in this Web3 space and super just networking more so with people on the internet versus in real life. But I am starting to realize that, hey, Matt, you got to get out there and start meeting people and locally as well in person because that stuff matters too.
Yeah, I think it all plays a part. But I mean, you personally seem totally relentless with the content that you're putting out and creating, because that takes so much time. Like all these video clips that appear on my feed of you doing production or performing or bass lines or the multi-talented instrumentation that you're capable of. I'm like, by God, that guy is dedicating a lot of time, and I guess the more time you dedicate, the more efficient, the more kind of mastery you have over something like that. But for me personally, that would take a lot of my time, is just this output that you're currently doing.
Yeah, not to make it so much about me, but just real quick, it's more so I'm just like trying to document it versus saying, "Hey, I'm gonna make content." So I'm not really like
Yeah,
saying that, "Oh, I'm gonna do all these videos." It's more so like I kind of just click play and content comes out of it, I guess. But
amazing.
maybe
Yeah.
that's how I trick myself
So it's
into
quite
like,
organic. Yeah.
yeah, because it is like whatever. I don't want to get crazy into it because I want to talk about you.
Okay, fair
But
enough.
okay, so how did you initially get into songwriting?
I got into songwriting, I think, when I came to secondary school. So in the UK, you're about 11 years old coming to secondary school. And a music teacher, I vividly remember this, was teaching us improvisation around the nursery rhyme Three Blind Mice, that rockin' nursery rhyme, if you know it.
Nice. Yeah, yeah.
And it was like, it sounds so stupid, but it was like a switch clicked in my head of suddenly understanding how creation happened, not the creation, but the origins of just being able to create something from nothing. And I remember being very good at being able to improvise this little kind of child's nursery rhyme. Um, and that suddenly made me realize, okay, I can make choices here. I can do something. And I think from there, around kind of 12, 11, 12, I started writing songs. I think by age kind of 13, 14, they were classically very long winded singer songwriter, like 6 minute piano ballads. So that is when I first started writing songs and mainly just sat at my piano at home in my parents' house, um, just kind of noodling away
Hmm.
back there.
So were any of these where I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, do you have a place where you get influence from? Like as an artist myself, I think I subconsciously listen to so much and then maybe that leaks into my songwriting do you have any influences yourself that you're consciously taking influence from, or are you more so just letting things happen and letting things flow?
So back in my days of yore songwriting, that probably would have been the likes of who my mum was listening to, which is a lot of Nora Jones, a lot of Katie Melua, who's a very kind of singer-songwriter, guitar woman. Um, and I think that naturally was my world because I felt I could kind of sing like them.
Mhm.
But today, I think it's a big combination. I don't actively choose someone that I'm taking influence from. And I think a lot of the joy of my songwriting comes from that moment of flow and being in the Zen space. However, I am often inspired when I hear another song, someone else's song. And I don't know if this happens to you, but on a film, something will come on and I'll start singing another melody to whatever is there. Um, and they can sometimes stem little ideas. So there are kind of tools that I find myself gravitating towards, or I hear a really cool song that I wonder if I can do an Emma Miller version of this,
Mhm.
which I think is a maybe healthier approach that I've come to rather than hearing a really cool song and thinking, well, that exists in the world now. I may as well quit and not do anything because this is the best song ever written and there's no place for my music.
Yeah.
I've tried to kind of expand my mindset there and realize, especially actually with the Web3 culture, that there is room for everyone. And we all have these fantastically unique perspectives that touch people, not in a soppy way, but just resonate with people in different ways. Like my brain might resonate differently with someone to the way that your brain would, and vice versa.
Mhm.
So that was a very long-winded way of answering quite a simple question, but I was
No,
trying to
it's
kind of
okay. I
reflect on what I do.
I love hearing how other people songwrite because I am also in the process. I'm more of a producer, but I've written songs for quite some time, but I was always afraid to put stuff out there. And it's always, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's interesting to hear other people's perspective, and I definitely can resonate with what you're saying. And
Mm-hmm.
the question I do have for you now, though, is I was kind of going through your catalog yesterday, and I'm
Uh-oh.
curious to know, do the seasons have anything to do with your songwriting? Like, do you take influence from like the weather and like the cold or the warmth
Mm.
or anything? I know it's kind of a weird question, but
No, I like it as a question. It's makes me think. I mean, that's what's amazing about having someone else's opinion or on your music or what they take from it. So maybe subliminally living in Scotland, I don't know, maybe the weather is having an impact on me. And just today as well, like I was wrapped up with my scarf and jacket, and it really felt like the first day of autumn today, just very cold. The leaves are falling, which is a very abrupt end to the summer. But I think in the UK, the weather probably does have an impact. We get kind of 5 seasons in a day sometimes.
yeah.
Um, but I have always been very drawn to organic things and the earth and Mother Nature. Um, and probably have written a lot of not symbolism, but I'm not very good at being direct in my songwriting. I think it's something I'm being more explorative with at the moment. But sometimes I kind of hide behind metaphors of nature or weather or kind of descriptive things to set a mood rather than actually saying what I mean sometimes. So that would be it's not a conscious thing at all, but it's interesting. You're seeing a theme.
Yeah, it's just something I almost pinpointed. I was like, because some of the things that you're singing about, and maybe even some of the names of the songs, I'm like, I feel like the weather is affecting Emma in some way, shape, or form, or she's getting influenced by a certain experience that's taking place in cold weather or something.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just what I
Yeah.
know.
Well, maybe as well when the weather does change and get colder. a lot of what we do is stay inside and sit down and be cozy or write. And um, I think it probably is the same everywhere, but certainly in Scotland and really where I'm from in the Northeast, it is dark by about 3 p.m. In the wintertime. So you then have these long, long nights ahead of you. And that's maybe a good kind of cocktail for emotive singer-songwriter is just to draw
Oh, for
on that.
sure.
Yeah,
That's really cool to hear. And before we do dive like crazy into Web3 stuff, I just had like a few more questions pertaining to
sure.
your songwriting and just, I guess, your production. So I think we might have talked about this on a Twitter space at some point in time, but what is your relationship like with your producer? I know you said you have a specific, you kind of have a go-to now for like a mixing engineer and a mastering engineer.
Mhm.
I mean, the song I listened to, Meet Me on the Lake, is it Meet Me? It's Meet Me on the Lake?
Yeah.
Okay. That's very like, it's singer-songwriter and it's piano. And there was obviously the elements of your voice, the background vocals that you added. I guess not specifically on that song, but how in depth do you go with your producer? Like, is it song to song? I'm assuming it's probably song to song, like, because some songs of yours have strings and different arrangements, and then some are more drawn back.
Mhm.
So I don't know. What is your relationship like with your producer or mixing engineer?
It is very good. It's a very good relationship that has developed over many years. And it was a massive sore point for me for quite a long time. I started self releasing music in 2017, and it felt like the biggest accomplishment to find not the same producer I'm working with now, but a kind of friend producer who really took time with me to figure out this balance I was looking for between those organic sounds and natural instrumentation and those kind of more interesting textures that production can bring. Um, and yeah, but what I'm trying to say is it's something I've really struggled with. I really, really struggle from bringing my kind of intimate demos that you do in the privacy of your bedroom or wherever it is your studio, your home studio is, um, and conveying the same effect once it's properly, quotes, properly recorded. Um, and I would feel a lot of my songs would kind of die a death when I re recorded the vocal, I re recorded the piano, and you lose those little special inflections or just something for me happens when you're first recording. Um, and I do think it's something you can work on. For many years, I thought that's just how it is. But I actually think that maybe, firstly, you can go easier on yourself and there's not as much lost as you think when you start experimenting with production. Um, but I've just gotten to know myself a bit better. I have also had the luxury of taking all of those leaps and going into different places with production and maybe deciding that it's totally wrong. But we've gone there. And that's one of the many expenses of being an independent singer songwriter is all of these explorations kind of do cost you both time and financially. Um, but that's what I've been doing in terms of production. Today, I work with a guy called Lucas Mendes, and we're very much collaborate on the production. So he takes a huge amount of direction from me, and I feel really comfortable working with him because he seems to really understand where I'm coming from, and is willing to do strange things that he might not think are proper or the right way of going about things. But the likes of that track, Meet Me on the Lake, that is self produced by me. It is a mixing engineer who is not Lucas Mendes. It's a friend of mine who I went to music college with in London who lives in the States, um, goes by the artist name Dutch Melrose.
Mhm.
And he mixed it for me. And mixing is an enormously important part for me because you can add so much production feel in a mix. So that those kind of watery vocals in a song like Meet Me on the Lake, that is really down to uh, the direction that Dutch Melrose, or Josh Harms, is his name, took it in. So it's extremely collaborative is my relationship with all of my producers, but it's taken me a long, long time to get there and to feel confident about taking things in a certain way and not doing this or that, or trying all sorts of different things. It's an ongoing journey though, certainly.
So with Meet Me on the Lake, did you arrange that whole song as well?
Yeah, so that's just me on piano and singing. And all of my songs, I do all the piano, vocals, vocal arrangement, harmony arrangements,
Mhm.
um, and the likes of the string player that you might have heard on. There's a song called "Set Me Down." That is my friend Aidan. Um, so the likes of that, I kind of did actually just leave him to it, and he created this kind of beautiful swelling string piece at the end. But no, all of the core kind of song is arranged by me.
Really cool because as I listened through it and I really dissected it, I did realize it was more minimal than I actually thought it was when I was just listening to it and not dissecting it. I was like, oh wow, like this is piano, vocals, and some background vocal layers.
Yeah,
But it sounds like
that
it's more, you know what I mean?
yeah. Well,
Which is cool.
that was my first music NFT, and I don't think I've released a song that is just piano and vocals, because that was one of the sore points, I think, starting out, is you can't do that. You can't just release your own song as it is. It has to be produced, it has to have all the sparkles and everything. And I thought, do you know what? I'm gonna put this song out that I probably wouldn't be confident enough to put onto Web 2. And I'm gonna just enjoy this freedom that I have with Web3 and start experimenting. And I'm so, so glad that I did, because I think you're right with that particular track. There really isn't much going on. There's a ton of, I am obsessed with harmonies, so I tend to like stack them high. Um, and other than that, and piano, it's really the mixing that has bridged the gap between having that ethereal, slightly produced twinge to it, with it still staying kind of simple. So it was a really, it felt like a really nice um, debut onto Web3 to kind of
Yes.
showcase those things. Yeah.
And when did you decide that Meet Me on the Lake should be, in fact, an NFT drop before maybe going the traditional route of releasing it on Spotify and other platforms?
I think, I'm not sure when I decided. I think the decision itself came from realizing I don't know if I would put this song out otherwise. And it felt like something I did want to share. And so that's my dog. Yeah, it felt like something I wanted to share. And because of the relationships that we're building on Web3, it just feels so much more community based and supportive, that it almost enables you to do those things. You know that, I don't know, people will respond to it. Um, so because of the nature of that song, it is quite an intimate song. I felt very natural to just put it onto Web3. Um, and Web3 went well and has actually given me the confidence to do the whole full circle, and it is going to come out on Web 2 onto Spotify and streaming um next week.
Nice. And
Yeah.
that's what's also really cool, I find, with this specific drop is it's almost like people got an exclusive access to this drop before it happens on all the platforms, you know? That's what's
Yeah.
cool. And I think we'll see more of that as well. I think just due to the fact that I don't know, I feel like a lot of people are here experimenting, but also people are realizing that, or at least I'm realizing that not only is it Web3, but it's also still like Web 2 or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
So that's rad that you're doing that. Um,
Yeah, I definitely don't want to cut these two worlds totally apart or to ignore one or the other. I think it's really easy because of the response we have in Web3. It is really easy to almost turn your back on streaming and maybe people that would quite like to have access to your music. Um, and so I almost want to embrace that and see where the crossovers can be, see where the conversations can be had as well. And luckily, I think because my first drop was very small, it was 10 pieces, I know almost everyone that has collected it. I've connected with them at some point in a Twitter space. Um, so I felt fine that they would be happy for me to put the song on the radio. They'd maybe even encourage it. It's kind of cool to see that your NFT is being played on the radio. And when that happened, I think last week or the week before, I got a wee spin on national BBC Radio Scotland, where the DJ Roddy Hart gave a little spiel about music NFTs. And for me, that was the coolest moment to have someone who has never in their life talked about music NFTs on national radio kind of bridge that gap. And if that's all it is, to me, that's worth it. That's worth kind of taking some Web3 stuff and filtering it into Web2. And hopefully your collectors are going to be on board with that. And it's just I'm very happy to have kind of open conversations with people. But yeah, definitely want to keep mixing and matching and seeing what happens.
that's really cool to hear. And I think I remember seeing that on your story, if I'm not mistaken, maybe on your Instagram. But I think stuff like that is super important because I really don't think blockchain and NFTs is like a hard sell. Like, you're not going to cold call someone and convince them that this is the move. But over time, like the more you see Emma Miller doing stuff with Web3 and blockchain, the more you're going to get intrigued. Like, oh, look, Emma Miller is doing blockchain and NFTs. It's going to be ingrained into people's minds, and then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden they're looking into what NFTs and blockchain is, and then they're getting a MetaMask and they're going down that rabbit hole as well. So I think it's a soft kind of sell, but if you keep doing it, I feel
Yeah.
like you're going to start seeing more results. And I'm not saying you're going to have thousands of people like buying the NFT, but more so, I guess I'm more so talking from like an onboarding standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very open conversation I've had with so many of my music friends, which are still a lot of them are based in London. And their ears certainly prick up. They're interested, they're curious. Um, but I think it's the angle you come at. So for the likes of getting some radio play, I only did that after I had sold out, after I had some things I could say about it, like getting to it's all kind of meaningless, but getting to 11, number 11 in the music NFT chart, so that immediately they have a point of reference of, oh, something successful has happened in this space. And you can almost even big up how successful it's been, because they have no context, to be quite honest with you. So when people start seeing stuff like that, I mean, that was the first time I mentioned it on my Instagram, was after I had accomplished this kind of small thing. And I was a bit hesitant of doing that because I think we've all experienced the lack of response or engagement you can get when you deign to speak about blockchain or music NFTs on platforms outside of Twitter. Um, so I think no matter who you are, you can kind of understand that it's been a big thing for me. It's been something I've been working for. And that was the kind of angle I came at, throwing it to my group of people on Instagram.
That's
Um,
that's great to
yeah,
hear. And I think, Emma, my opinion is just keep talking about it. And
yeah,
even if one person sees like a post, like maybe it won't affect them the first post, but maybe the 10th post they start digging deeper. That's all I'm trying to say, because I
yeah,
think it's a big part of what we're doing as artists, and to not talk about what we're doing isn't, I don't think it's the move, you know?
I would agree. Like, I think we definitely need to get away from this idea that NFT is a dirty word and you're not allowed to mention it outside of Twitter because if you are on social media, most likely, unless you're some kind of hated political figure, most people that are following you because they like you. They want to be on board with what you're doing. So I agree. I think we should persist in kind of drip feeding bits and bobs. And Web3 for all of us who are in this space, I'd say is fairly dominant in our lives. So to just erase it from our other platforms doesn't really make sense. But it's knowing how to convey any of it and let it make sense. But yeah, I think good advice to
But
keep mentioning it.
yeah, I think it's different for everyone. And I'm not saying that that's the answer, but as an independent artist myself, and maybe for other independent artists who, not that we're just starting, but we don't have massive fan bases, maybe it would be different if we were already in a position where we had a bunch of fans and those fans were not stoked about us doing stuff with NFTs. Maybe it would look different, you know?
That's it. Yeah, if we had kind of in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who could rock the boat, that would be a bit scarier. But yeah,
But
we're in a privileged position, really.
yeah, I mean, we don't have anything to lose, really.
Yeah. Agreed.
But I do want to go back to a little bit about your drop and specifically about the art.
Yes.
So and if I'm not mistaken, the art was done by your mother.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about that.
Big up Mama Miller.
Yeah.
Um yeah, the artwork, I love the artwork. I walk my dog kind of every day, and one of my favorite walks isn't far from my flat. And the start of the walk is a pond with many, many swans. They reproduce a family every single year. So there's two kind of uh adult swans with all of these cygnets. Um, and I've just been taking some photos of them, sent them to my mum. I felt like kind of captured the mood. Um, Being water based and the swan as an animal is very kind of elegant and ethereal almost. I don't know if we can call it a swan ethereal. So I didn't really spend too much time trying to second guess it. I just thought this would be great. Mum, can you please draw me a swan? So it's in watercolor. Um, there's 10 editions. So very faintly in the corner of each of them is kind of 1 to 10, 2 to 10. And yeah, I thought let's keep it simple and effective, hopefully, for the first drop. So that is from Leslie Miller, who's an artist and also known as my mother.
So what does mom think about NFTs?
I mean, she's really keen. She's been very supportive. I had quite a big conversation with her. She came to stay with me for a couple of days in Edinburgh, and I had a big conversation with her about how I'm spending my time, what's kind of pulling me in all of these different directions. And she was extremely encouraging of almost throw everything else away and concentrate on this, which was amazing to have that backing. I have to say, both my parents have always basically just told me to carry on doing what I'm doing and to go with my gut and yeah, see where it takes me. So that's her opinion of Web3 is she doesn't quite totally understand everything. But the bits that I'm trying to explain to her, she does get, and she's going to be working on a really quite a big drop with me. So there's a lot more explaining to do with diversifying images and trying to convey why we do that and what it all means really. But she's certainly on board.
That's pretty rad because when I was looking at the artwork and listening to the song, it just everything really did go well together, like for you as an artist and for you as a brand. So it's really interesting. and I know we're like talking in like business, oh, brand or whatever, but I know like I don't know. I could just tell that that painting and that music and everything just packaged really well together. Like I think you did a really good job. Not you already know that, but I'm just like saying it, I
Thank
guess.
you. No, but I appreciate it. And that's cool to hear as well, because the other thing I could have done was just put up a press shot, put up a photo with the song. But I wanted to try and embrace as much of it as possible, including the fact that an NFT can have a artwork alone as a selling point. So I thought if I'm not able to offer hundreds of diverse utilities at the moment, then at least artwork from an artist is actually another thing that you're going to get with this music NFT. So I wanted to kind of just start off as I meant to go on with that one, really.
And it's like a piece of your song in a way that's digitally available that will never disappear, which is like a really interesting concept.
Yeah, yeah. No, the whole digital collectible aspect, I think, is really cool. And there is already, like, I'm doing a gig in November around London NFT week, and the 10 collectors that have Meet Me on the Lake have free entry to that in London and the metaverse version. So there is already kind of utility around it. But I do feel, being a musician, that music offers so much. And to have a kind of, if this was a limited run of 10 vinyls, the pride you would have over owning one of those vinyls, this definitely is the digital equivalent of that, is how I find it easiest to explain. Um, but yeah.
So when you sold these, obviously we know we've been interacting on Twitter Spaces, but maybe for someone who isn't listening, where have you seen a shift in your networking strategy versus, being in Web 2 versus now being in Web 3, where maybe you're in a situation where you're meeting people in a different way? Do you want to, I guess what I'm trying to reference is Twitter Spaces, and if you want to
Mm-hmm.
touch about how Twitter Spaces have had an influence on your all around strategy, if that makes any sense. Not a strategy, but
Yeah.
more so just like,
No, I know what you're saying though. Um, so I think it's had a huge impact on me and how I might otherwise have gone about doing things. I don't know if that's been conscious, but certainly my mindset has totally shifted with what value I have as an artist because of Twitter Spaces. Um, Twitter Spaces is, I mean, it's like a fast track of relationship building, not anything that I think is possible through other platforms, where you're not having actual daily conversations with people who aren't necessarily your fans, but who could be potential fans, but are also just connecting with you as a person to person basis. Um, so the respect that people have for each other in Twitter spaces, especially up in, you've got an audience of listeners, and then you've usually got several speakers who are all kind of generally interacting with one another. It's usually always space for people to talk. When someone talks in ideal spaces, everyone listens. So there's this culture of respect and community, um, and making space for one another. In terms of music, I don't know if it's because of the Twitter culture or if these are the types of people that are finding Web3. But with music, it is hardcore music fans that are on Web3. People that, for them, a utility is spending time with you, is spending time with the artist, which for quite a while, and even now, is something I find it hard to get my head around, and almost feel shy about offering that as a utility. But from talking with collectors or with people who are kind of interested in music, something they want as an option is, like a 30-minute Zoom gig a week with an artist. If I put that on Instagram, I would be lucky if one person joined that Zoom link. And where I noticed this whole different kind of strategy, maybe, if, or I don't know if I kind of got the sense of it there, is with my release coming up on the 23rd, I'm doing a double drop where my Web3 music NFT is going to come to streaming. And one song that I've had on streaming that I never did kind of promotion with is another kind of intimate song called Low Light. And that's going to come to be a music NFT. And so the kind of thing that I've done is if people do a screenshot of the pre-save of Meet Me on the of the streaming for Meet Me on the Lake, the single that's coming out, I'll give them a place on the allow list for the music NFT. And I put that on Instagram, and I don't think I had any. I didn't actually say it was a music NFT. I said it would be they'd enter into a raffle, but I've had no kind of engagement from that. I put that on Web3, mentioned it in a couple of spaces, and immediately I get DM'd the screenshots of people pre-saving. I get kind of them sharing it on their feed, and it's the level of engagement and the switch in dynamic of what I'm offering. It's no longer, can you do this for me? Or it really helps me if you pre-save it. It really helps me if you like this post. It's they see value in what you're offering. So I don't know if I'm quite answering your question, but
Yeah,
the
no, it's great. I think
yeah.
it's totally giving more insight than I mean it's yeah, keep going if you want.
No, that's basically it. For me, it's the type of person that is on Web3. And maybe that is it. I've been trying to think about that. The the type of people that would have been there for the beginning of the internet. It's a certain type of person who's got passion, vision, energy. That maybe that's why the avid music fans are also on Web3, or people that are on Web3 happen to be big passionate fans of whatever it is they're a fan of, whether it's a PFP project or a music project or an individual or photography. They really get behind it, and they don't ask for much in return other than you to keep doing your art and the thing that you want to do, which is just a revelation, and not something I'm getting from traditional kind of platforms.
Yes, because I've definitely seen situations to counter that. I've seen situations where collectors almost want to have to do with the musician's career. I haven't experienced it firsthand, but the whole like the royalties being tied into NFTs, and then also
Yeah.
I've seen artists do a thing where they give a little leeway and say, "Hey, with this NFT, you're gonna have like a little bit of influence on a decision I'm gonna make." But I guess I haven't really seen it like that much in depth. But have you like what other drops have you seen that you've been interested in or intrigued by?
So I think what you were mentioning there first is maybe a question I've had about when I expand from my current bubble and grow my community is, are those going to be the conversations or the questions about, having streaming royalties, which, sorry to burst everyone's bubble, but there is no royalty, there is no money in streaming. So I find that whole concept as an investment, yeah, not not a legitimate one right now.
Yeah.
Um, what have I seen with other projects? Um,
That you've liked, like other projects that you've seen that you've been like, that's a cool project. Like I dig that. Or I don't
so most of the projects I know are all fellow musicians, um, the ones that I know kind of intimately. And I mean, things like writing, offering to write songs for people, offering to like sing someone happy birthday. Um, I'm, yeah, what have there been?
or just like
Projects.
what's an individual that you are fond of in the space who has had interesting drops that you've maybe taken part of or you've been intrigued by?
So drops that I've taken part of, or part in. Oh, do you know what? Who am I leaving out? Bloomin' Everflow. So Everflow, who we both have as a mutual friend,
Yeah.
um, I've really loved his drops. I'm still no hard feelings of a flow, but I'm still waiting for my comic. But I bought his latest music NFT that came with a limited um manga comic that he has made.
Mhm.
And he showed me little snippets of this like a few months ago. And I was so keen to get my hands on it because it was so inspirational. Like Everflow is this very inspirational, deep, grounded person.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, being able to, I think it's 50 copies of this manga are going to exist in the world. I feel personally kind of connected to Everflow because of what, like us, we've spent so much time in spaces together over these past few months. That to me, that was so cool that I had the opportunity to buy his music NFT and get this manga that no matter how the spaces progress, how kind of Web3 progress, this is such a unique, incredible thing that I will feel forever kind of connected to Everflow with, even if we don't get to kind of converse all the time. So I thought that was a really cool drop. Um, and yeah, quite inspiring. Other things that I've been part of, I'm a collector of Violetta Zeronis. And I just got a couple of Josh Savage's music NFT that he's minting just now. Um, and I mean, much of that is supporting fellow musicians in the space,
Mhm.
but I can see their talking in a business sense, I can see their trajectory. And we are all finding ourselves to be almost at the heart of what's happening in the music NFT side, very much at the kind of forefront of what's going on. So to be around those people, I kind of thought, well, this is actually a great investment as well, is to benefit from those. And you get things like lifetime access to concerts with some of these music NFTs. You get, yeah, I mean, the artwork and the thoughtfulness and just the kind of communities that you become a part of. I think a lot of it is about being community based. And I've been spending, in particular, been spending a lot of time with Josh Savage, co-hosting a lot of his spaces over the past few weeks. And something he did, which I think is great, was create little red rings that you can put around your PFP that say, I think it's Savage Degens on them. And because your own PFP is there in the center of the ring, you kind of forget that it's there and you end up going into other rooms on Twitter representing a bit of Josh Savage. But on top of that, you see other little red circles in the room. And it gives you an instant feeling of kind of warmth and like, okay, some of my people, some of our community are here no matter what space I'm in. And that has been really my first insight into why the phenomenon of PFP projects are so big. Because I understand why music NFTs are going to be a thing, because no matter what, you have music at the heart of it.
Yeah.
Whereas finally getting that moment of the kind of embrace you feel being part of a community, I can really understand why people are doing that. The humanoids is one that I've was just gifted actually recently, and it's their community that really embrace you. And yeah, I'm kind of excited to be part of a few different things via good old Twitter.
That's interesting that you say that about the Josh Savage rings because
Mm,
I feel like as humans, it just makes sense, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because as humans, we connect with each other based off of common interests. For example, I'm going down the street on my skateboard. I see another person with a skateboard. We, I'm probably going to give you a high five or, or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's like really cool
exactly.
to hear that
Yeah.
that's it just makes sense. It's like almost obvious, but it also like you're like, oh yeah, okay, I get it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an identity thing, isn't it? It's like you've instantly got common ground with someone and maybe a little bit of shared experience if you've been in you kind of are have a general awareness of um environment or maybe what's been happening
Hmm.
in with certain people, certain spaces. But yeah, identity is a huge thing in life, but certainly in Web3.
Yes, and I think digital identity is becoming more prevalent specifically because of blockchain and Web3. And of course, social media has made a lot of that prevalent. But I think more so, Web3 and NFTs are going to push that to heights that maybe we've never seen before due to the fact that a lot of this is actually public. And for me, I'm interested to see what other people are collecting as well and to see if I do have any common ground with other individuals who I'm maybe interacting with or who I see here and there. So that's what
Mm.
also excites me too, is the fact that like it's a different way. Well, it's a digital way for us to connect with people more in depth versus because online I feel like it has taken away from social media has taken away from connecting, but I feel like it's getting to that area where it's actually going to add more value than it's taking at this moment, like from here on out, versus where the stigma around social media now is kind of dirty and oh, it's screwing up people's lives or the overconsumption of, content and things like that. But I do feel like trying to mitigate the amount of content we consume, but also trying to take place in connecting with humans and using it for the good versus getting sucked into like a downward spiral with it, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I think the evolution of social media is definitely happening. Almost don't think it's comparable having kind of spaces versus Instagram because you are effectively it's like having a phone call, like a 100 person way phone call.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, the only other thing that I see is quite a huge negative with Twitter Spaces and the culture on that specific social media is the degen lifestyle and the sleep deprivation and almost the kind of bragging rights that come with saying, "Oh, I didn't go to bed till 7 a.m." Not that it's bragging, it's people are grafting and
yeah,
suffering probably because of it, but it is seen as the norm. And if you're not doing that, you're kind of, this is probably me projecting, but you're kind of perceived as lazy or not doing enough. And for me, like even doing my course in counseling, having a kind of investment in mental health, but personally going through like different mental health episodes, um, it is vital to me that good mental health and well-being stay kind of at the forefront. Um, and if that means I take a little bit longer to build and to expand, then I'm okay with that. Because I don't think I can be the 4 a.m. person or that logs onto a 1 a.m. space that doesn't sound bad, but if it doesn't finish until like hours and hours after that, it's definitely a lot more draining. Like every night being in spaces, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you are constantly on and talking to people and trying to listen to the conversation and contribute. Um, and I'm not someone that can multitask and do other things really at the same time, other than maybe actually a bit of like housework or something. Um, so when I'm on spaces, I really am like quite present.
hmm
And that can, I think we can all feel that. I've definitely seen a lot of cases of burnout and in that culture.
yes, I couldn't agree more, and I think it is important. Like probably the number one thing is being aware of what you can and can't do. Like you said, if you're in a space,
Yeah, and everyone's different as
yeah,
well.
yeah. I mean, some people can be in the spaces for hours on end, and some people can deal with the toll. But also on the other end of it, if you're an artist and your main goal in life is to create art, there's like I feel like there has to be an even divide between spending time networking and in spaces and doing socials and then also creating. And like you said, I do believe it is different for everyone else. And yeah, because it's like when you burn out, then you really aren't present. And then it's like really like, oh, what happened to that individual? And then it's like, well,
Yeah.
they they're a little tired of being that present and they're kind of reevaluating and reapproaching, which you see a lot of. And I think it is a healthy conversation to have at this moment in time, especially when we're not in this like hype phase and we're more in that building phase, which is also
Mm,
really exciting. And it's important to just go slow because this technology is not going anywhere. You as an artist, you're not going anywhere. So yeah, that's like
yeah.
kind of my opinion on it.
Yeah, I think the only thing with being an independent artist in that space as well is that it is just you. So you, if you're not out there representing, not many people are going to be doing it for you.
Right.
And that's maybe where the likes of a team, like a PFP team, they can probably, I know there's going to be a founder, there's going to be like people that speak more or represent more in spaces, but they can probably take the reins a bit more. They can switch around. Someone can be doing it this night or another night and have a schedule. But as individual artists, nobody else is showing up for us. So we don't have that kind of organized professionalism in kind of boundaries or work or um, being able to look out for ourselves in the same way because if we're not showing up, no one else is showing up for us. So I fully appreciate how it gets to that level because we see the results, right? We see that there are consequences to us showing up in a good way. Things progress, we grow. So it's a tricky one because you don't want to, yeah, you don't want to slow it down in that sense. But yeah, I'm definitely with you. If we're we're here early and we can take our time, and I think it's important to, yeah, really ground yourself into it rather than superficially just be kind of caught up in the whole super speed aspect of it.
Yeah, and I think for me, what works for me is saying, okay, I'm gonna do a space today. I'm going to be in spaces no matter what space for an hour or
Mm-hmm.
something. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what works for me, but it's different for everyone. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I want to transition real quick because we're gonna probably start shutting it down. I think we're probably coming up on an hour, I'm assuming. Maybe, or maybe we passed that.
No,
Um,
we're good.
okay, cool. So, hmm, why do you think blockchain and NFTs matter for artists?
Oh, you got those technical questions for me, Matthew. Why do blockchains and NFTs matter? Certainly, it matters to me um, because of the complete autonomy it gives me as an artist. There is no middleman taking away my data on my fans, if I'm really honest, to put it in kind of business levels. People streaming my music on Spotify, I have got not a clue who they are, where they come from, if they want to connect with me, if they want to come and to a show, or even if they like my music. A stream doesn't really mean anything um, until you kind of know the person behind it. So I love the blockchain for that reason. In terms of what it does for me as a musician, I kind of know, um, as I said, every single one of my 10 collectors. If I wanted to down the line when I do a bigger drop, I could probably figure out who the other many hundreds or however many there would be collectors because of how information is stored on the blockchain. So that is hugely empowering for artists. And it almost totally flips the tables of we become the gatekeepers to this space. We become the kind of influencers that people need to approach in order to get the seal of approval. Um, Even just some of the conversations I'm having just now about brand deals or how I am of value for kind of bringing on board uh, other people. It's just totally flipped it on its head for me, and those are not conversations I would ever be having in Web 2, where the artist is just kind of fodder for bigger businesses, and where the cut that you get for this huge piece of content you're providing is really minimal. And even when you get onto having a label deal, it gets even less actually, with what is kind of being taken from you.
Hmm.
So
That's pretty awesome.
yeah.
I love that you mentioned the data aspect of it because I do feel like that's a really important thing as an artist. Even if you get like 100 streams, like that's still 100 people, and you not having any access to that information is hindering you as an independent artist. So I do
Mhm.
think I agree with you in the aspect of we have more, it's direct, it's artist to fan or artist to consumer versus artist to middleman to consumer. And then all that information gets basically gatekept from the artist or the independent artist. So
Yeah.
that is a really cool concept. And I do think it is very valuable for artists in this space to know who their collectors are, to know what their interests are, to know what else they collect. So you can kind of use that data for whatever you want versus not knowing any of it and not having an idea in hell of what to do with the minimal information that you get from
Yeah.
like a streaming service. Like, okay, they're from Australia. Okay, what else? Well, that's it. They're from Australia.
Yeah. Yeah. And just on the whole decentralization of it, we really own nothing in terms of our followings that people sometimes take years building on social media. Any of those platforms, I know whether it's likely or not likely, any of those platforms could be pulled from under you at any moment. So ownership is really important, and knowing who your audience is and being able to connect with them, I think, is the most valuable thing. Um, and that's something I think the blockchain is really at the forefront of knowing why it's important and how to use it, and how it's going to benefit creatives.
It is amazing because it really is like the first time humans can digitally own anything with the blockchain
Mm,
versus how we've been interacting on the internet through corporations and through companies who own data. It is a game changer, and it sometimes it doesn't like just talking about it now, like I think of it, but sometimes I just not every day I think that thought.
yeah,
So
yeah. I think when we think those thoughts as well, I think we were in a space together once where I did start trying to draft a document of any time there's a moment of clarity of really distilling what it is that we're finding important or finding in benefit, what it is we're being caught up in. It's maybe good to add it to the document just so that onboarding is easier, that communication is easier, that we can really explain what is going on, and get other people to join us on this wacky adventure.
yeah, and I think there the unfortunate aspect of all this is, well, I'm trying to have a half glass full mentality, but looking at the reality of just the situation, I feel like a majority of the people will utilize platforms who maybe take larger cuts, 50, 60, 70%, because they're going to do a lot of back end work. And I understand where people are coming from, but I feel like these conversations are important because maybe that person stumbles across this podcast and they're not crazy familiar with what we're talking about, but 6 months, a year, or 2 years down the line, everyone's releasing NFTs through Instagram or TikTok, but they're like, wait a minute, I don't need to give TikTok 70% of this asset that I created. I can just use a platform like Manifold.xyz and create my own smart contract and take only have OpenSea take 2.5%. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean? I think it's good to have these conversations because down the line it will matter. And down the line, a lot of people will be releasing their art through the blockchain, whether they may know it or may have a vague idea of what that actually means, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's happening now. I think Instagram have just made NFTs um integrated into their system. I think Bored Ape Yacht Club have got their official Instagram on the go with their NFTs. So yeah, I think doing what you're doing and creating this kind of content is going to be hugely valuable to people as they start progressing into this side of the world, the digital world.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that because who really knows who's going to stumble across this type of thing, and it could impact someone down the line from maybe making a better decision on how they want to
Yeah.
move forward from
Yeah,
seeing.
if you're listening out there and you have stumbled upon this podcast, come and find Matthew or me on Twitter and tell us that you listen to the podcast. That would be the most cool experience.
That would be pretty awesome. I think I have a few more questions. Any advice for a newer artist just getting started in this space? I mean, we're both pretty new, but you do have a little bit of time under your belt. So if you have any advice.
I mean, I don't know if we're new anymore, Matthew. I feel like once you've done a few months in this space, you're an old hand.
Yeah.
I think the space itself is still new to everyone. So there's no rules. There's all of this exciting kind of exploration to be done. So in a sense, we are all still new, no matter kind of how long you've been here. But I would give the advice that I think a lot of us have been given to us, which is literally to spend time in the space. And that really takes place on Twitter, in literal Twitter spaces. One of the first things I did was join music NFT spaces as a listener. Maybe for a week or two, I was just a listener until I finally got confident to press that mic request button. And not to worry if you feel nervous about doing something like that. You don't even have to do that, but I would encourage you to find music NFT spaces, find photography spaces, find whatever your niche is. Whether you're an artist or not, there's actually going to be a Web3 style space out there that could be a fantastic entry point for you to just listen and absorb. And one thing I think that is fine across the entire platform is to ask questions. People are desperate to get new blood into this market and love when serious newbies come up to ask any kind of question. There is no, certainly in any space I've been, there is no stupid question. And in many ways, it gives us a chance to practice how it comes across to a newbie and to figure out where the communication isn't right and what we need to work on as kind of not leaders, but purveyors in this space, people who keep talking about it. So my basic advice would be to just get yourself onto Twitter. I am speaking as someone who hadn't used my Twitter account in maybe 3 years. And now it's where I spend all my time. So don't worry if it's not the normal place you'd find yourself, but get yourself onto Twitter and just start dipping in and out of rooms. Maybe if there's one that resonates with you, try and come back to it a few times. And in no time, you will hopefully start feeling a rapport with some of the people on there. And it is a serious fast track learning curve. So I think within a few weeks, you'd have such a better sense of what it's all about than you maybe do at this point. But yeah, fairly easy. Just get yourself on some Twitter spaces, really.
Yes, and I don't know if we mentioned, can you just give like a quick description of what Twitter Spaces is?
Twitter Spaces, I've tried to describe it many times to my mom. Um, it's basically a digital room. I kind of sometimes refer to it as like a massive WhatsApp group call where there's only audio and you see people's profile pictures and you can scroll down the room and you see how many people are in there, all the different, again, PFPs, profile pictures. And there's usually maybe up to 12 speakers. There's a host, some co-hosts, and styles are different in every room. People have kind of different ways of going about it. So some rooms are extremely structured where it's a panel and they're interviewing one another or they've got a guest on. But I'd say the vast majority of Twitter spaces are open conversations. They might have a theme for the room that's in the title, but it's basically kind of a group of people just talking about usually Web3 related things, sometimes very philosophical things, sometimes absolute nonsense. And you can join as a listener, which means you just kind of appear and listen in, or you can request and come up and speak and join in the conversation. But does that describe what a Twitter
Yeah.
space is?
Yeah. I'm always just interested to hear, and maybe someone who's listening who got this far down in the interview, thank you for sticking around, by the way, can get some insight as to what a Twitter space is. So yeah, it's basically, I describe it as an audio chat room that has a host, like you said,
That's
that has
such
a
a better
co-host.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
Um,
more concise way, an audio chat room. Yeah.
But what's really cool about it is there's individuals like Emma, who obviously we met through Twitter Spaces. There's individuals who have extensive knowledge on how to code smart contracts. There's individuals who know a lot of things and can give people and are very willing to give this information out for free, which is super valuable to just growth in general as you as an artist, you as an individual. So all I can really say is Twitter Spaces is an eye-opening and can open eye-opening experience that can open many doors for anyone who's getting involved with them, I guess.
Hmm.
That's what I would say.
I think you've caught the mood of it so much better there because an audio chat room or my description of literally explaining like listeners and speakers is not what the draw is of Twitter Spaces. And what you just mentioned there has just reminded me of the incredible people that you meet in Twitter Spaces, people that you would not normally even get to speak to. Um, that could be, I mean, I've spoken with like Grammy award winning music producers and had conversations with people like that or listened in rooms with people like that who are just sharing such wisdom and knowledge of their industry. So there is kind of serious experts from every industry out there, music and otherwise, that find themselves on Twitter Spaces. So the fact that you can be in a room with them or even connect and personally have a conversation with them without needing somebody's administration assistant's emails and someone's friend to make an introduction, because that's kind of normally how those things go. That is the magic of Twitter Spaces that you have just kind of captured more there, Matthew, which is why we keep coming back to them, right? Is the connections and kind of who you get to meet and talk with.
Yeah, and to touch on it just a little, like just a little bit more, when we're interacting on Instagram and TikTok and other social media platforms, like you said, it's if you want to get in contact with someone, the DMs is most likely out the window. You have to contact someone who knows someone who knows someone. My experience with Twitter Spaces has been I've never networked so much ever in my life on the internet before, like Twitter Spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like, wow, like from when I entered this space to now, the amount of people I met and the amount of knowledge that I've gained and the amount of knowledge that I'm going to gain, it
And
just
it
like
doesn't
amazes me.
feel like networking.
No,
as such. It doesn't, when you say networking to people, I think they think of a LinkedIn profile or
right.
just something quite dull. And it's, you don't realize that you're doing it, but it's true. Like it is network city, and it is the most networking I've ever done as well. Is just making all these connections.
There's an individual who I follow on TikTok. He's an insightful individual who talks about music industry things. And one thing that he says, it's like all about the hang,
Yeah.
just like it's all about just chilling and interacting
Yeah.
with people. And like you said, you don't even know you're networking, but you're actually networking. It's like
Yeah.
weird. Um,
Yeah, it certainly gives you, yeah, if that's a skill that people want to develop, then start also doing Twitter spaces, because then you realize the worst way to network is to just ram something down someone's throat. And I think whoever said that is on the money with the hang. It is all about the hang and being yourself, and just being in each other's presence. And that's how you start seeing the value in one another, and wanting to reach out to people, wanting to help people, wanting to give your time or your advice or whatever it may be. People are so willing to do that in that space because you've made a genuine connection.
yes. And to close it up, to take, all NFT stuff, Web3, blockchain aside, the last question I have for you, Emma Miller, is
Yes.
what is your favorite thing about music?
My favorite thing about music is it is the aspect of delving into someone else's psyche. So when I am falling in love with a piece of music, I think part of the reason I'm falling in love with it is it's like opening a window into someone else's soul or someone else's brain. And if I love music, there's that sense of awe of like, how was this created? How on earth did somebody get from A to Z to make this happen and to do this thing in it and that thing in it, not just in a technical sense, but literally in a creative sense of how did you get that from your brain to being a thing? So I don't know if that says kind of what you're asking, but that's my favorite thing about music is the perspective shift of being able to stand not even in someone else's shoe, but someone else's mind, and just be in awe of it and connect with it for those reasons, and maybe how it kind of resonates with you, and how it's managed to communicate with you. Like how have they managed to know that that's how I was feeling, or this is the melody that I would respond to. And so yeah, maybe connection, the kind of connection it offers is my favorite thing about music.
Nice. I thought that was like a fun question to ask. So,
Yeah, it's a good one.
but yeah, to kind of close it off, I just want to say thank you for taking your time to chat about a little bit about what you do. And everyone should go check out Emma Miller's new drop coming out next week. Well, yeah, I think this will be out by then. Meet Me on the Lake, which we of course talked about probably about a half hour ago on this podcast. So yeah, y'all should check that out when it comes up on Spotify. But yeah,
Amazing. Well, thank you, Matthew, for having me. I've loved this. I've loved being able to get some one-on-one Matthew time and connect. And yeah, hopefully people will come find us on good old Twitter space for our hang.
yeah. And then I'll just like say one thing, and then we could talk for like a brief second after, and then we could part ways. But yeah. So basically, thanks for coming on, and I guess tune into the next one.
Do it.